Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. What is the strangest language in the world? Many linguists believe that all languages share certain universal rules and features. They believe that humans have an innate or natural grammar that we are all born with. However, there is a language from South America, from the middle of the Amazon jungle, which is so strange and peculiar that it challenges this theory. Let's discuss it in this episode of Thinking in English. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all transcripts and bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Linguist. Linguist. A linguist is someone who studies the structure and development of language. As in, he is a well-known linguist and an expert on South American languages. Universal. Universal. If something is universal, it exists everywhere or involves everyone. For instance, love and relationships will always be a topic of universal interest. Blank canvas. Blank canvas. A blank canvas is someone or something without a fixed character that can develop in many different ways. So, for example, a newborn baby is a blank canvas who can learn any language. Innate. Innate. An innate quality or ability is one that you were born with, not one that you have learned. James has innate goodness. Grammatical. Grammatical. If a sentence or some language is grammatical, it obeys the laws of grammar. For example, it's not grammatical to say, me and my friends went to the cinema. Instead, if you want to be grammatical, you should say, my friends and I went to the cinema. Isolate. Isolate. An isolate is a person or thing that has been or become isolated. So, for example, social isolates often become careless of their own welfare. Finite. Finite. Having a limit or end. For instance, the funds available for the health service are finite, and we cannot afford to waste money. Abstract. Abstract. Existing as an idea, feeling, or quality, not as a material object. For example, truth and beauty are abstract concepts. Noam Chomsky is one of the most famous linguists, philosophers, historians, social critics, and political activists of the 20th century. In fact, he is sometimes known as the father of modern linguistics, and hundreds of thousands of university students around the world have probably read his books and used his theories. I was, and I still am, one of those students. In fact, behind me right now, I have a book Chomsky wrote on the Palestinian-Israel conflict. Chomsky has written about many different topics, ranging from linguistics to politics to war and to media. Today, however, I want to briefly introduce one of his most important theories, the theory of universal grammar. The basic idea behind the theory of universal grammar is that there are certain rules that all humans are born already possessing. We don't learn these rules from our experience with the natural world. We don't learn these rules from seeing, from speaking, from listening, touching, or smelling, etc. For a long time, philosophers and psychologists have debated and thought about young children's minds as being a kind of blank canvas or an empty piece of paper. They believe that our grammar and our language were only learned by listening to it being spoken and then repeating. However, this is no longer the major theory, no longer the most dominant idea. Instead, now I guess the common belief is that the human brain is built to learn grammatical languages, even without hearing languages as a baby. In fact, experiments done on newborn babies have shown that although they do not understand or comprehend words said to them, they do possess the ability to understand the sounds of the human voice and even tell the difference between certain sounds. Apparently, a baby can tell the difference between the words mom and mop, for instance, without actually knowing what the two words mean. These innate rules make it easier and faster for children to learn to speak. In other words, your environment determines which language you learn. If you're born with a Chinese-speaking family, you're going to grow up learning Chinese words and vocabulary. However, all children are born with the tools already in our brain to learn a language. This also suggests that every language in the world has some common or universal features. The natural ability doesn't include vocabulary of a particular language, which means that words and meaning still need to be learned. In addition, there are other aspects of language that must be learned and vary between different languages, like word order or pronunciation. However, like I said earlier, Chomsky and others who believe in this universal grammar believe that all languages share some kind of basic rules from which different languages are built. Perhaps this is why it is possible to learn and become fluent in languages completely unrelated to your own. One such apparent universal feature is what is known as recursion. Recursion in a language suggests that there is no limit to the length of a grammatical sentence. Now, let me give you some examples. It's not the easiest thing to understand just from my explanation. So, let's say we start with a simple sentence, like, the man walked down the street. Now, we can keep adding information to this sentence, as well as keeping the grammar correct. Again, the man briskly walked down this long and winding street. In the middle of the night, the man briskly walked down the long and winding street. In the middle of the night, the tall man with a big head briskly walked down the long and winding street. We are adding more information as we say these sentences. And if you really think about it, there is no limit to the amount of information we can add. Let me give you a much simpler and better example. Tom likes sport. Jack said Tom likes sport. Tom heard that Jack said Tom likes sport. Jack was told that Tom heard that Jack said Tom likes sport. We can keep this sentence going forever. It can continue and continue and continue. And Chomsky believes that recursion, this continuing forever, no upper bound, no upper limit for how long a sentence or a grammatical sentence can be, is one of the universal parts of all languages. Okay, you are probably thinking right now, What does any of this have to do with the title of this podcast? What does this have to do with the strangest language in the world? Well, every language in the world, according to Chomsky, from the forests of Papua New Guinea to the clicking languages of Africa and the isolated languages of the Arctic, has recursion. Apart from one, maybe. Now, this is not completely accepted by researchers and experts, but there may be one language in the world without recursion. And if this is the case, it casts doubt on the theory of universal grammar. Deep in the Amazon rainforest of Brazil, an indigenous tribe called the Piraha, or my pronunciation is probably bad, but from now on I'm going to say Piraha. And they speak a language isolate that has the potential to shock the linguistic world, and in fact already is shocking many people. It's also very controversial. According to Daniel Everett, who is a linguist best known for his studies of the language of the Piraha people, the Piraha language demonstrates that language is not innate, but is developed by humans. The Piraha language is not related to any other language currently spoken on our planet. And while languages all have unique features, Piraha has so many more unique features than usual. For example, in the Piraha language, there are no numbers. While some other languages don't really use numbers, the Piraha language also doesn't allow for counting. Linguists have done studies on tribes in Papua New Guinea and other places around the world which don't use numbers, and all of these tribes are able to learn to count in a foreign language. The Piraha have so far not been able to learn to count in a foreign language. Piraha language has no words for colors. They cannot talk about the distant future or the distant past. They have no theories about how the world was created, and they cannot talk about these. And they have no way of talking about what happens after a person dies. They have no words for all, each, every, most, or few, which many linguists believe are universal. The language only has 8 consonants and 3 vowels, which means it has one of the simplest sound systems currently known out of all languages. However, the tones, stresses, and word lengths are so complicated and complex in this language that Piraha speakers can actually hum, sing, or whistle their conversations without saying words. They can use these tones and stresses and word lengths without words. And importantly, according to Everett, the Piraha language does not include recursion. Everett gives the example of this sentence. Another day, an old man slowly butchered a couple of big tapirs by the side of the water. While in English we could add a word like brown to this sentence, in Piraha, adding anything else to this sentence makes it ungrammatical. It does not make sense anymore. Phrases in this language can only have a single modifying word, like an adjective, or occasionally a second modifier at the end of a sentence. This means that Piraha is finite and cannot be recursive. Another example I found comes from a New Yorker article, which is linked in the blog. The reporter wanted to say, I saw the dog that was down by the river get bitten by a snake, in the Piraha language. I'll say that again. I saw the dog that was down by the river get bitten by a snake. However, this is not possible in the Piraha language. They have to say, I saw the dog. The dog was at the beach. A snake bit the dog. The Piraha only accept observable things as real, and when they talk, they only state their thoughts in a direct way. The Piraha live their lives exclusively in the present and the real world. Their language does not allow for true abstract thought. They can only talk about things that exist in the real world. Numbers, colors, the past, and the future are abstract concepts, abstract thoughts. There is no such thing as the number one in nature. So instead of having words like red, blue, and green, the Piraha will use relative terms like this looks like blood, this looks like the sky, or this looks like leaves. Everett began his study of Piraha language as a Christian missionary, with the aim of translating the Bible into every language in the world, and his task was Piraha. However, he eventually realized that they could not learn about Christianity, as learning about religion, especially sophisticated Western religions, requires abstract thought. The Piraha also, they never caught more fish or picked more berries than necessary, because they do not make plans for the future, as the future does not yet exist. Certainly, Everett's theories about the Piraha language are not accepted by everyone. Noam Chomsky, as well as many of his followers, argue that universal grammar is still important, and that the Piraha language is not a strong counterexample. But in any case, the Piraha language is unique and challenges many of the ideas that we have about language. Here is today's final thought. What is the strangest language in the world? Well, the word strange is relative and cultural. It depends on, what do we mean by strange? However, I think that many people, if they knew about Piraha, they would probably say Piraha is strange. It has no numbers and doesn't allow for counting. It can be sung or whistled without using words. And it only uses the real, observable world. It also challenges Chomsky's theory that our grammar is universal. What do you think? Are humans born with a natural grammar already built into our brains? Or do we learn completely from listening to the language that we grew up around? Do you think Piraha is a strange language? Or is it equal to all other languages? Let me know what you think. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.